Another day, another cruise brawl. And no, it's not the cruise line you probably suspect. And did you hear about the cruisers who were left behind in Hawaii and the many dramatic moments with Royal Caribbean over the past couple of weeks? Hi, I'm Melissa, a university professor who loves to cruise and who loves to talk ships, so let's get right into it. Picture yourself floating lazily in a freshwater pool, a perfect day at Coco Cay. Drink in hand, music playing, and suddenly fists start flying. That's exactly what happened on August 3rd when more than 30 guests began throwing punches in the Oasis Lagoon. Utopia of the Seas and Jewel of the Seas, which are Royal Caribbean ships, they were in port, and the brawl got so big that security had to shut down the entire lagoon. In one clip that has gone viral on TikTok, you can hear the shock in the other passengers' voices. It's the kind of thing that makes headlines because it clashes so sharply with the chilled out vibe of cruising, and in particular, the chilled out vibe that Royal Caribbean spends millions to create. Now, I've been to Coco Cay many times. It's a great private island, and the lagoon is enormous. There's a swim up bar, floating mats, there's music, DJ, all that kind of stuff. But with that kind of party turn up atmosphere, sometimes comes people drinking too much and temperatures that get a little high. And I'm not just talking about from the Caribbean sun. Now, we've seen a lot of similar dust ups on Carnival, some smaller, some escalating to full on brawls, but this one was notable. One, because of the number of participants. Again, there's a difference between a cruise ship fight between a couple of people or a skirmish with maybe 3 to 4 people and a full-fledged brawl with dozens. Carnival is probably the most known for brawls. There was a huge one in Galveston a few months ago. So this one is definitely noteworthy. Now, in my many years of cruising, I've learned that you can avoid the rowdy crowds by avoiding nightclubs, by avoiding late night pizza lines, and the food areas and areas that people congregate at midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning. And when it comes to these private islands or these private beach clubs, that you can head to the quieter areas. And at Coco Cay, that's going to be South Beach, or booking a cabana at the Coco Beach Club, where access is limited, but you got to pay for it. Now remember, cruise lines, they do take fighting seriously. They're getting tired of it. They're tired of it going viral. It's giving cruising a black eye, figuratively. And it's making certain cruise lines like Carnival and Royal Caribbean, which are usually the two cruise lines where these things happen. So they're really starting to take this very seriously. And with that comes not just sanctions, and if it happens on land, you could face sanctions on land or local law enforcement, but these cruise lines are starting to ban cruisers engaged in these bad behaviors. They're banning them for life. So I think it's crazy that people do this. And also, why are you fighting? You're on vacation. You're on a cruise, for God's sake. And as a cruiser who has seen some skirmishes firsthand, thankfully I've never firsthand seen a brawl, but people knock it off. You're ruining everyone's good time and you're killing the vibes. So what happens when you mix sunglasses, a slippery infinity pool, and the world's tallest cruise ship? On Royal Caribbean's brand new Icon of the Seas, a guest decided it would be a fun time to hang over the glass wall of the adults-only hideaway pool to retrieve his fallen shades. He hoisted his legs up, lost his grip, and flipped into the spillover gutter below. Now, thankfully, he was uninjured. I think the drink package probably had something to play with this, but the viral video is pretty sickening. The hideaway pool sits high up on the ship's upper decks. It's cantilevered over the ocean, and it has clear panels, so it's an infinity pool, so you can see out into the sea. Now, those panels are there to keep people safe while providing incredible views. It's not meant to be climbing equipment. And those safety features like gutters and railings, they're not there to accommodate wannabe stuntmen. They're there for emergency situations. Now, beyond the obvious danger, guests who break rules can be kicked off at the next port, and that is not a cheap mistake to make. You can also risk bans for life. So my advice, invest a few dollars in a strap for your sunglasses, or if you do lose them, just chalk up the loss and deal with your lost glasses. But either way, people need to use some common sense. And on the same ship, a far darker incident recently unfolded. A 35-year-old South African crew member allegedly stabbed a 28-year-old female colleague during what Royal Caribbean described as a personal dispute. And then he jumped overboard and later died. The woman survived, thankfully, after being treated for multiple wounds. Now, this is a very heartbreaking, sad, and rare case, but it does highlight the side of cruising that we don't often discuss, which is the emotional toll on crew. Crew members, they're underpaid. Cruise lines flag out of the United States, so they circumvent US labor laws and minimum wage regulations and things like that. And these crew members are sometimes working 6-7 days a week, and their time off isn't a day off, but rather a few hours and a day off. They take contracts that are several months, minimum usually 3 months. They're living away from their family for very long periods of time, so it can create a hotbed of issues that create some emotional distress that can lead to extreme situations like this. Not saying that this is why this guy did this or anything like that, but I'm just saying it's a tough environment in which to live and work. Now, many cruise lines, people don't know this, they offer counseling services and peer support to their crew, but stigmas around mental health can still prevent people from seeking help. And this is my reminder too to travelers. Always please treat crew with kindness and patience. Cruise ship crew are some of the hardest working people out there. You never know what someone is going through. You never know what is happening. And hopefully the cruise lines can help destigmatize the need for mental health and provide mental health services to their crew. And as a management professor, I would love to see some labor reforms in the cruising industry, because as much as I love to cruise, it's problematic in some ways, and the treatment of their crew is just one of them. But thankfully, this young lady is okay, and hopefully she will recover fully. And in another Royal Caribbean story, the cruise line is making waves by furthering the trend that we've seen with cruise lines, nickel and diming. And this one's really got a lot of people hot under the collar. Royal Caribbean just removed a loophole that allowed one adult in a cabin to buy a lower tier package while their partner bought the deluxe beverage package. And this is important because not every cruiser drinks. I personally do not drink. There are recovering alcoholics, there are cruisers with medical conditions, there are cruisers who are cruising while pregnant and they shouldn't be drinking. And so these loopholes have existed for those purposes. But of course, people are going to take advantage. And when that happens, the cruise lines tend to tighten the rules. As of August 1st, if one adult purchases the deluxe package on a Royal Caribbean cruise, all adults in that stateroom must do the same. And of course, cruise lines have this rule because they want to prevent drink sharing, where one adult, say a spouse, buys a drink package and they're sneaking drinks to their partner the entire cruise. It happens. I see it a lot, so I get it. But also these drink packages aren't cheap, so people are just trying to get their money's worth. Now, a spokesperson for Royal Caribbean said that the change is meant to ensure responsible consumption and to curb sharing. But in practical terms, it forces moderate drinkers, or people like me, who I might drink maybe one drink on a cruise, if that, to either go all in on a very expensive drink package or just skip the package entirely. And again, I understand why they do it, but it's frustrating for people like me who don't drink, who sometimes cruise with people who do drink, or people who are recovering from alcoholism or dealing with medical conditions or pregnancy. And the rule does apply only to the deluxe package. Non-alcoholic refreshment packages can still be purchased individually. But if you're on the fence, look for one of those pre-cruise sales. Now, Royal math drives me crazy. Royal Caribbean constantly is running promotional discounts for things like the drink package, where they claim it's 20 to 30% off, but it's usually not a bargain because they jack up what they say is the regular price. So you really gotta be careful when you're looking at promotions from Royal Caribbean in particular. Deals are out there and they can be had. Just do your research before you pull the trigger and you actually buy one. And don't forget that a lot of cruise lines, including Royal Caribbean, do provide allowances for bringing on board a bottle of, say, wine. Usually that's limited, one bottle per adult to enjoy in your cabin. There's a lot of restrictions with that. Always check your cruise line and make sure that you're following those restrictions and the guidance of how you can bring that on board. And also, if you're curious if the drink package is worth it, the answer is usually no, but it's very situational, depends upon your unique needs. But I did recently put out a video about that. I'll drop the link below if you want to check that out. So I want to know, does this policy change how you plan to cruise with Royal Caribbean? And do you think it's now worth it if every other adult in your cabin has to have that deluxe drink package? While we're on the subject of Royal Caribbean, see, I told you it was a very busy, newsworthy couple of weeks for Royal Caribbean. The cruise line has extended its suspension of calls to Labadee, Haiti, through at least October 31st. Now, if you follow cruise news at all, or you're a Royal Caribbean fan, you know Labadee has been a problematic port of call. I've been to Labadee a few times. I love it. It's one of my favorite private islands. It's very chill. I think it's beautiful because you have beaches and you have mountain views. It's just lovely. So I love it. I'd love to get back there, but that's not going to happen at least for a while. There is a lot of political unrest in the country, specifically near Port-au-Prince, and Royal Caribbean's kind of been off and on. They've suspended Labadee, they've gone back. They've suspended, they've gone back. And now it's been suspended again, and that suspension has been extended. 23 sailings across 5 ships, including its flagship Icon of the Seas and Oasis of the Seas, are being rerouted to other Caribbean ports, places like Grand Turk, Nassau, St. Kitts, and Costa Maya. Now again, Labadee, it's not necessarily a private island, it's a private peninsula. They have a zip line called Dragon's Breath. It soars over the ocean, it's really cool. There's a roller coaster through the hills. There are markets where vendors can get a little pushy, but they're still cool nonetheless. And it's not only a fan favorite, but also an economic lifeline for many Haitians. And again, this suspension is not anything new. Similar suspensions occurred even back in 2019, and then again recently in 2024, and have been off and on due to political instability. So as much as I miss this port, obviously safety has to come first. And it is fenced off, it's private, exclusive to Royal Caribbean guests, it is guarded, but if there's political unrest and there's even a concern for passenger safety, I think Royal Caribbean is making the right call here. And I know it may be disappointing if you booked a cruise with the intention of going to Labadee and your cruise gets rerouted, but consider it an opportunity. All of those ports that I mentioned, which are the replacement ports, they're all wonderful. Yes, even Nassau. Grand Turk in particular is wonderful. They have a beach right there at the pier. It's a free beach day. St. Kitts is awesome, and it's a port that folks don't typically get to. It's not one of the more commonly visited ports. And again, even Nassau has a lot to offer. And I have free port guides literally for every single one of these ports. So you can check those out and make a plan for what to do if you do have these as a replacement port. You can find them at profmelissa.com. Now for a change of pace, let's talk about some fun stuff. Norwegian Cruise Line just announced a massive expansion at Great Stirrup Cay, which is their private island in the Bahamas. The new Great Tides water park will span nearly 6 acres and feature 19 water slides. The star attraction will be the 170-foot tidal tower, housing 8 of those slides. But there will also be a dynamic river almost 800 feet long, a 9,000 square foot kids splash zone called Tide Pool Town, cliff jumping platforms, which is a favorite of my young kiddo, and even the Caribbean's first jet karts aquatic race course. Norwegian is also adding a pier, a tram system, they're upgrading bars, they're upgrading games across the island. So they're really making an investment in Great Stirrup Cay. So if you've sailed with them before, and people always ask me if I cruise Norwegian, I do have my first ever Norwegian cruise booked for November. And yes, we are going to call on Great Stirrup Cay. So if you've been before, you know there's already plenty to do here. The new park will require separate admission, so it's pay to play. So make sure you budget accordingly if it's something that sounds appealing to you. So I want to know, when it comes to cruise line private islands, are you willing to pay extra for these thrills and these extra bells and whistles? Or would you rather just have a free beach day with a lounge chair, a good book, and maybe an umbrella for some shade? All right, degenerate gamblers, I've got some good news for you. If you're like me and you love gambling on a cruise, which oddly enough, I never gamble on land because it's just stupid. I gamble on cruise ships because I get free cruises, and I have a whole guide to it. I'll drop the link below and teach you all of the ways. And by the way, these free cruises are not exactly free. You still pay port fees and taxes, and you have to spend money in the casino to earn free cruises. But if you do like to gamble on a cruise ship or elsewhere, there's some new legislation that is set to increase the IRS reporting threshold. It's built into the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, and it's set to increase that threshold for slot machine jackpots from $1,200 to $2,000, and it indexes future increases to inflation. Now, this is a source of joy for a lot of gamblers because that $1,200 threshold is pretty sad. It has been in place since 1977. It's a very low threshold, and many players who even hit moderate bets hit it more often now because there are higher payouts, higher bets. People are starting to gamble to earn free cruises, and it is kind of annoying when you hit that. So in casino play on cruises, we call that a hand pay. So a hand payment, if you won on a slot machine and that win was over $1,200, the machine would lock up, it would say call an attendant, you would have to wait for an attendant. I'm fortunate now because I cruise and gamble so much, I've won several hand pays, and it's kind of a hassle. You have to sometimes sit and wait for a long time. Sometimes I've had an attendant come right away. Sometimes I've had to actually tip my chair with my big win right there and go hunt somebody down. And they have to come, you have to fill out paperwork, they give you a form, you take your ID, and you're doing this to generate a tax form that you get when you get back home in the mail. And it's just kind of a hassle. It can kill your momentum. You just won big. You want to just kind of keep going. And it can also draw some unwanted attention because on a casino, on a cruise ship, when a hand pay happens, a lot of times people kind of stop and look. Some people like that, some people don't. So with this new threshold, that delay won't kick in until you hit $2,000 on a win. Now the change is not immediate. The IRS still needs to update its regulations, but casino operators and tax experts are optimistic. So it's not here yet, but it's coming down the pipeline. Now keep in mind too that table games have different rules, and you do still have to report gambling income, even if you don't get that W-2G form in the mail. So I always recommend setting a budget, signing up for the ship's casino rewards program. That's how you win free cruises. And of course, consulting a tax professional if you have big winnings, especially. But I want to know, does this higher threshold make you more likely to try your luck in the cruise ship slot machine, or do you prefer to stick to shuffleboard? Finally, let's talk about an experience that shook hundreds of cruisers to the core. Late last month, a massive 8.8 magnitude earthquake off of a Russian peninsula triggered tsunami warnings across the Pacific. Hawaii's sirens wailed. I saw pictures and videos on social media. It looked very scary. The US Coast Guard ordered all vessels out of the cruise port immediately, and Norwegian Cruise Line happened to be docked there. Their Pride of America was docked in Hilo during an inter-island cruise. So traffic on the Big Island was already lock jammed when the captain had to leave hours ahead of schedule. What happened was the cruise line basically had to put out a call to the passengers of, hey, if you're not on the ship right now, we gotta go. And there were 300 passengers and crew members that were still ashore and couldn't get back to the ship. So they basically advised them, hey, find high ground in case the tsunami hits. Some guests were even on ship-sponsored excursions. They were exploring volcanoes. Some were going independent, which is how I choose to rock when I'm on a cruise. And many of them ended up in a local high school gym, which was set up as an emergency shelter 3 miles inland and over 100 feet above sea level. So again, Norwegian did the best they could. They sent the messages with instructions. They coordinated with local authorities. It was just kind of a very rare, unusual, thankfully, and scary situation, but they handled it as best they could. The ship waited offshore until the all clear came the next morning, and passengers were eventually ferried back. Now, legally, captains must get out to deep water where tsunami waves pose risk, because staying in port could damage not just the ship, but the harbor. Imagine a tsunami coming in and pushing this giant cruise ship inland and all the damage that that would cause. Now, this is rare, but this is not the first time that emergency protocol has separated cruisers from their ship. But the scale and the immediacy and the urgency and the scariness of this really made it a headline. But this is a powerful reminder. Always carry your passport with you, even if you're visiting a port of call where you don't need it, or at least some type of identification. Make sure you have any really critical life-saving medications that you need, and always keep cash when you go ashore. And have your phone and watch for alerts from the cruise line. And always, I sound like a broken record with this, but it's really important. Always, always, always travel with travel insurance. You can get an annual plan. It's pretty affordable. I have a household annual plan. It covers me and my 2 girls the entire year for all of our travel, land and sea. So if something like this happens and we have to stay a night, or we have to stay longer, or we miss a ship for some reason, we're always covered. But either way, scary situation, and thankfully all of the cruisers and the crew are accounted for and safe.